What's up, family, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to pick up on part 3 of this conversation that we've been having called Black Nonbelievers Next Door. And as I've done with all of these, I'm going to be sharing within the description information about the organization Black Nonbelievers. So as we're going through this conversation, if it crosses your mind, if it's something that you value, I'd want to encourage you to consider supporting by giving a donation. All right, so before we jump into this, of course, make sure that you like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell. Consider connecting with this community in whatever way that makes sense for you. And then also check out the merch because it's dope. All right. So, for those of you who know, the very first episode of this particular series, I open up by sharing a few of the quotes from the actual from this survey that we've been coming from, which is the U.S. Secular Survey, and this one is a brief on Black non-religious Americans. And so I shared some of those quotes directly from those Black non-religious Americans who participated in this survey as a way of letting all of us get better insight into how Black people are dealing with non-belief, right? And what Black people who don't believe may look like. What is that imagery? Because this is something that has been so foreign to our cultural zeitgeist, not just as a racial group, but literally as a country. This is so foreign to the way that we see Black people that when most people think of a Black atheist, their mind just draws a blank. Even though ever since we've been on this continent, and even when we were on the continent of Africa, atheism has been a major, well, I don't want to say a major part, but atheism has been a significant part of our journey. And I'd be glad to share some more of that story as we go through. And not just atheism, but more particularly humanism. All right, so this part of the report that we're picking up on today, there is some data. We're going to skip over that a little bit because sometimes it's just hard to talk through. But I do share the link to this report in the description, so that way you can take a look at this yourself. You're actually going to get the script that I'm going through right here. So this section is called Challenges Facing Black Non-Religious People. So based on significant feedback from Black participants in focus group interviews conducted before the U.S. Secular Survey, we anticipated a higher level of concealment and isolation among Black survey participants. In order to assess the context in which non-religious people conceal their beliefs, survey participants were asked how often they avoid talking about topics related to being non-religious or that would reveal their non-religious beliefs in various circumstances. Our data revealed that on average, Black participants concealed their non-religious identity slightly more than 4% than participants of other races. And that's 2.98 versus 2.87, scale range of 1 to 5. Now, what is more significant are the areas of Black participants' lives where this concealment occurs. Nearly 4 in 10 Black participants, most or always conceal their non-religious beliefs from members of their immediate family, compared with 31.2% of other participants. The rate of concealment was even greater among extended family, who were more than half, 51.1% of Black participants, mostly, family where more than half of Black participants mostly or always concealed their beliefs, compared to 42.7% for other participants. A similar pattern emerges at work, 45.6%. Mostly are always concealed, and at school, 43.2% mostly are always concealed. Too often, Black participants did not have any part of their lives where they feel comfortable discussing their non-religious beliefs or their non-religiosity. Compared to other participants, Black participants were 42% more likely to report that they always conceal their non-religious beliefs in 3 or more areas of their lives. And that's a difference of 14% versus 10%. Now, there were a few quotes in here that I did want to hit before we move on. One is from a female in New Jersey, and I'm saying it that way because that's how it's listed. But too many Black community spaces assume that Black people are Christian, and even ostensibly secular spaces will include prayers to Jesus or praise dancing, which feels exclusionary. I haven't been targeted personally in such spaces, but I do find that I am much more likely to hide my non-religiousness when talking to people in such spaces, which it is a highly exclusionary practice that is very common in the Black community, primarily because of much of the church propaganda. As I've shown, many of the most significant movements in the Black community were crafted and orchestrated, if you will, masterminded by Black humanists and Black atheists and participations with others. And many of them have been, damn near Christ washed out of our history. And so almost any event, if it's a community event, if it's a MLK Day, if it's Malcolm X Day, who wasn't even a Christian, we're going to find a way to bring Jesus in it. And we're going to have the praise dances. We're going to have the choir sing. And it's just an assumption, you know. But really, that's I often remind people that's not always just religion. Because when you actually begin to examine the lives of the people who are organizing these things and the people who are putting these events together, in many cases, they're not actually religious. They're doing what they feel is socially acceptable. It's almost like playing politics, and that is one of those are some of the nuances that I want to highlight more. Because once you begin to notice that, you will notice that the state of religion, especially in this country, and not even just in this country, because this is a sociological this is sociologically sound. This idea that the state of religion is overinflated, but primarily due to we're still reeling from a world where people had to say they were religious or they died. And we do still live in a world where, in certain contexts, people have to say they're religious or they lose their jobs. Even if the people they're losing their jobs from are not living this life, it's not even about that. And that's how you know it's not about the religious beliefs. It's about the company line. It's about sameness. It's about tribalism. It's about you have to be one of us, regardless of what that one of us is. But yes, this definitely happened a lot. All right, and then there was another one. I had a Black supervisor I really liked uh, who casually say she believed atheists lacked morals and good sense in front of me and my coworker friend who is Christian. It was the first time I faced something like that at work, but it's even harder to deal with Black folks in the community who can't fathom that there are other people who don't subscribe to Christianity. If she knew I was a non believer, I knew she would have treated me poorly and tried to change me. And this is a reality. I would say young lady. She was an older lady, but she used to be on staff at my church in the early days. And that's exactly what she did with her religiosity, even though for her it wasn't towards atheists, because in her mind she didn't run into any of those. But did run into a lot of people who were part of the Pride community. And she would go out of her way to remind them of how they're doing the opposite of what God wants them to do. Um, and this is whoosh. And I want to think through this a little more with a little more depth, because this isn't just religiosity at work here. There's some immaturity at work here. There's some childishness, which there are some subtle nuances between childishness and immaturity. Um, there's a lot of things working, but the religious superstition doesn't help. It sometimes kind of embolsters people in their personal opinions, whether those opinions are relevant or not, if you know what I'm saying. All right. So let's kind of continue reading on a little bit. Moreover, this concealment was significantly more frequent in very religious communities where Black participants were more likely to always conceal their religious identities compared to religious communities. Average concealment was 1/6 higher in very religious communities compared to not at all religious communities. Similarly, I don't know why I read that like that. Similarly, concealment was 9.2% higher among Black participants who lived in rural locations in comparison to those in urban locations. And one of the things that you will see from the data, which is another thing that I've been trying to highlight, for years. Uh, Number one, just within the community, from a political standpoint of trying to get Black people to learn how to use their voting power as a block, especially since the majority of us live in what is popularly known as the Bible Belt, but more adeptly known as the Black Belt. And there's some double entendre reasons why that is, but the large number of Black folk living down here is a part of that. And one of the things that you do see in this data is that a large number of Black atheists also live down here. And then even more, and when I say a large number, like 54%, according to that data, of Black atheists live in the South, in the Black Belt, and that's quite significant. But not only that, it another thing that I found just absolutely promising from a trending statistical perspective is that among Black atheists, the numbers of people were more likely to be younger and or LGBTQ, you know, plus. Um, I like to say pride, younger or pride. And it's not like one or the other, but it's like they're young and they likely identify with one of these things, which kind of gives us insight into where some of this moving towards atheism is coming from. It's coming from, how do I want to say it? Pre-generational rejection, you know? But then you can also call it post-generational rejection, because it's rejecting the generations that came before, or it's the generation after rejecting the generation that came before. But it's a generational rejection type of thing, and that was, and this is the thing. Like, you, if you really want to see why I am more optimistic about the trend of atheism, you really want to spend some time studying the church, because especially the American church, because you will see that this trend of rejectionism is the same trend that led to the charismatic church, and then it's the same trend that led to the seeker friendly churches, and then it's the same trend that led to the urban churches. It's always a rejection of that generation before. And what's absolutely fascinating is the the numbers in America for increasing in non-belief were not projected to move as fast, because what really pulled us back is the Cold War, and attaching the idea of atheism with communism, and attaching the idea of capitalism and democracy with Christianity, and then which you then tie in religious identity with national identity, and that's what slowed down this trend. This is why America's trend, it has been slower, though it was faster at one point than other developing or industrial nations. The Cold War slowed us down. So we were expecting to stay at those kind of Cold War trends, but we've actually begun to accelerate. A major part of that is by far and large what has been happening in these urban and seeker friendly churches. And believe it or not, it's not the scandals. And that's an interesting phenomenon to me as well, is that when people go to a church that ends up getting involved into in a really big scandal, the people who are the most upset about the scandal tend to become more entrenched in their religious ideologies, just at a different church. It's often not scandals that ends up leading these people to atheism, those few who end up trending out and rejecting. In most cases, it's almost like this thing of moving from trying to figure it out to clarity, right? And because that's what these churches end up giving you the freedom to do without knowing they're doing it, is giving you the freedom to kind of try to figure things out and to see things, as you can understand them. And then you start giving yourself permission to do that. And so then one day you're just sitting in church and you're enjoying it. And then you start paying attention to why you're enjoying it. And you're like, I'm enjoying it because the music is good, you know? And it's not even the stuff that the dude is saying about God that's really making me excited or antsy. It's the stuff he says that's encouraging and that's motivation and that's motivating. And then you begin to realize, like, oh, it's really just motivational speaking. And then you're like, oh, the God part is not needed, you know. And then you get into this point of and again, because you got there, like you get to that church because you are rejecting your family's idea of church. You know what I'm saying? That's how you get there. That's how you get to the seeker friendly churches. You know what I'm saying? That's how the non-denominational movement spread like wildfire. And that should have been a clear sign that the church was on its last leg, to the point where there were churches being born and they just no longer felt the need to identify with any denomination, no longer felt the need to identify with any type of longevity or system of legacy, having no apostolic system of succession, which is very important, in Christianity, by the way. And so when you started getting non-denominational churches, that should have been a clear sign. Okay, that was a big rabbit trail. All right. So research has revealed that concealment can lead people to feel a lack of authenticity, be less able to establish close ties with others, experience more social isolation, have lower feelings of belonging, and have lower psychological well-being. And this is very important, especially the lack of authenticity aspect, which is why, one of the things that I do feel is important for me to do is to model authenticity on this channel. And so I do my best, and that's why I have no problem telling people to fuck off and stuff like that, because that's what I'm really thinking. I have no problem when I realize that somebody is being, a jackass, just dismissing them and keeping on, because I want to model authenticity. And I say that to say, when people are already reeling from the social isolation of their own culture, or their own cultural group, or their own cultural norms, it makes it that much harder to actually integrate, if you will, and engage with people who identify with this new label you've attached yourself to, that are not a part of your culture. And because you've already kind of become a little shell shocked, you're going to be less likely to be your authentic self around those people. Now, again, that's not linear. Everybody's not like that, but by far and large, you're going to run into that. So that's another thing that we have to be mindful of. And so we have to find ways to create space, right? Um, Loneliness, stigmatization, and depression. In order to measure, complex sociological phenomena such as concealment and stigmatization, we created scales using multi-question assessments that examine how frequently the participants encountered stigmatizing behavior or engaged in concealment. Similarly, to measure psychological outcomes, we use standardized constructs to measure loneliness and social isolation, and separately to measure likely depression. And then they give us a little note to refer to the reality check report for more details about how these assessments were created. All right. So research has revealed that concealment can lead people to feel a lack of authenticity. Read that part. Among atheist communities of colors, concealment has been shown to be associated with both increased discrimination and higher levels of psychological distress. Absolutely. And even in my own story, when people just thought, there was an organization who just thought that that I did not practice their religion anymore while working for a religious organization. And I was arrested. Welcome to the South. Um, our data shows that higher concealment is associated with several types of negative outcomes among survey participants, including increased loneliness and risk for depression. It took me, well, damn near 10 years to get custody or full custody of my children, my two sons, um, primarily due to my non belief. Had to defend it in family court consistently. On average, a black person who always conceals their secular identity scored 36.6% higher on the loneliness scale than a black participant who rarely did so. So basically, black participants who rarely disclose what they are or this secular part of their identity, they have a better life as far as loneliness is concerned. And I mean, that's real, you know. Overall, black participants scored 7.7% higher on the loneliness scale than non religious people of other races. On average, black participants residing in very religious communities scored 18.3% higher on the loneliness scale than black participants who reside in not at all religious communities. Now, here is the rub, because that means, again, 54% of the black of these black atheists live in the South, which, while I told you is appropriately called the Black Belt has been subverted by the Bible Belt. So loneliness is a real issue. And then, unfortunately, loneliness is going to lead to further stigmatization because then you're going to be even more less likely to disclose. And if you're even more less likely to disclose, then you are even more less likely to identify others who may share that identity or that affinity with you, rather. And which, again, this is why it's important, why I'm going to keep sounding the alarm. And I'm going to do more than just keep sounding the alarm. I'm going to keep doing the work, because we need community, not just community, but we need communities. We need autonomous communities all over, everywhere we can get them, even if you ain't doing nothing but coming together to play bingo and to collect some money to do some community missions, you know, maybe feed the poor or something like that. But yeah, we've got to start doing the work. Um, let's see here. Yeah. Oh, here's another one. My community is this is from a male in Texas. My community is hardcore religious, so I have to hide my secular belief and any beliefs, thoughts, or activities that don't align with what is described in the Bible. Having to watch what I say around my community limits my ability to speak freely, as I don't want to get caught out and exposed. And like, you know, reading stuff like that, it's hard, especially because you know it's true. And I exist in a very odd place when it comes to my thoughts about my community, which means I am not overly flattering of my community, nor am I overly condemning of my community. I try to toe a very interesting line, but you know, I think when all is said and done, we're gonna find a lot of cult-like behavior in quite a significant amount of Black families. Um, At least that's been my experience. And because, you know, and that's what this is. I mean, that's what that was a description of. That's why I said it. Black participants also had significantly higher rates of likely depression than other participants. 1 in 4 Black participants were likely depressed compared to 17% among participants of other races, meaning that Black participants were 1.6 times as likely to be depressed. Moreover, Black non-religious youth 18 to 24 were more than 3 times as likely to be depressed as older Black participants. Um, and again, that's another interesting phenomenon because the 18 through 24 makes up one of the larger demographics of the participants in this, which means they are fighting through depression to to stay on this side of reason. Like, and man, like, hats off to you. You know, um, honestly, it was the opposite for me. I was more depressed as a believer. Um, And I don't know. I think it's because I went so hard in the paint for so long that once it was over, and and then I was just able to start dealing with me, and that was helpful. I mean, it wasn't overnight for sure, but it was helpful. In addition to concealment, well, no, here's another one from the female from Florida. I am the only black atheist that I know in my area. It's quite lonely. I have not experienced any discrimination, but there is definitely stigma associated with being an atheist. I am planning to relocate to a more progressive city soon, you know. And then you have to think about the cost of that for a people group that are already economically behind. And so then you make one change in your life and you have to kind of pull yourself even further economically behind, pull yourself from the only support system and even though it may not be great, having to start over from scratch isn't going to be that great either. Not saying it's a death sentence for sure, but it's another hurdle. And so this doesn't just impact people socially; it also impacts people economically. Which I would argue that you cannot separate economics from our social existence, at least not the way we are now. In addition to concealment, stigmatization of non religious people can have a significant negative impact on their health and well being. We found that overall, Black participants were subject to slightly more stigma than other non religious participants. Certain types of stigmatizing experiences were more frequently experienced by Black participants than others. For example, nearly three quarters, and that's 73.8%, of Black participants were sometimes, frequently, or almost always asked to join in thanking God for a fortunate event, compared to 65% of other participants. Moreover, Black participants were significantly more likely than other participants to report almost always encountering each of the stigmatizing experiences listed in Figure 12. And I'll see if I can find that figure in a few. In very religious communities, Black participants encountered an even larger level of stigmatization. Compared to not at all religious communities, Black participants in very religious communities experienced 35.1% more stigma. Black LGBTQ participants reported 6.2% more stigmatization than the non LGBTQ Black participants. On average, participants who experienced more stigmatization were also more lonely, and that tracks, right? A female from Georgia. It is really hard for me to find open-minded people that are comfortable with me being non-religious. I have to pretend around many people that I'm religious when I'm not. I get really irritated thinking about it because it feels like I cannot truly be myself around people. I often wonder if I'm ever going to find something that's going to like me, someone that's going to like me for me. And that's a real sad place to be living as an adult, you know. Um, and a male in Puerto Rico, there is not so much stigmatization in my community as there is non-recognition that we are among them, and that's stigmatization. But I get it. People speak ill of non-believers not out of malice, but because we are perceived as mere abstractions. And just the way that was worded, I want to highlight that because this is another thing that you have in minority communities. You get people who, especially in territories that were more highly suppressed than others, or more highly oppressed than others. There's this mindset of absolute refusal to use the worst possible word to describe the situation. So, like, even times with people like in Jamaica, they'll say things like, "Oh yeah, we haven't had any race issues," and this is, from Black people living in Jamaica. It's like, "Oh, we don't really have racism issues in Jamaica. It's just that all the white people have the power," you know. Which is kind of like this, it's not a stigmatization issue. We're just not recognized. And it's like you're afraid to call it what it is. And this is something like, man, this is actually something that I literally deal with a lot of the people that I work with in the Black community. It's like you're afraid to call it what it is, because once you call it what it is, you have to deal with the variables of how it got that way. you know. That's, I think, and I don't have any data on this, but I think there will likely be a trend other than the black atheists who exist, because there's a whole group of black atheists who exist because their parents were from the Black Power movement, you know. And I think that's an underrepresented number statistically, because there's a large subgroup of them who do not engage social media, so they're not going to be represented in statistics like this. And part of the reason they don't engage social media is because the 60s. So they stopped trusting, the government. But there are quite a few black atheists who stem from those movements. But because when we think about black movements, we only think about the civil rights movement, which I've already demonstrated was orchestrated by a black atheist. But because we only think about the civil rights movement and we have all of this religious imagery, we think that black atheists, that all of the black atheists are people who are deconverting from Christianity. And that's not a complete picture. Just because you don't know the people exist doesn't mean that the people don't exist. And this is a great moment to again talk about black nonbelievers, such as the case with the founder of Black Nonbelievers, who was a black woman who was not raised in religion. And many of the people she's platformed have had a similar testimony, just raised around it, as in their families had to endure what other people were doing. But yes, but then the ones that are leaving Christianity, many of times it's not just a disillusionment with this religion. It's typically is connected with the disillusionment. And again, I don't have the data on this. This is just things that I've observed within my own sphere of work. Is that it tends to also, there's also a connection with the disillusionment with my parents, or my family structure, or even my community structure. And another trend that is notable in data is that quite a few black people who become atheists become some form of black nationalist or black conscious or Pan-African, on that journey. Either that becomes like the gateway, or atheism is the thing that gives them permission to try that out. But it's always shocking to me when talking to other black atheists, and I end up finding that out. It's like, oh man, that's pretty cool. All right, so, and then just the stigmatizing experience. I did find that chart, and these experiences are, people have asked me to join them in thanking God for a fortunate event. I've been asked or have felt pressure to pretend that I am religious. This was like the straw that broke the camel's back for me, after 10 years of just kind of being in the closet. uh, people people kept trying to force me to pray and stuff like that, to pray over food, and I think because they knew that I am generally an amenable person, so like I don't feel like anything bad is going to happen to me if I say these words. But at the same time, it got to a point where I'm like, you know what, this is dehumanizing, and I'm not going to play this game anymore. But I've been asked to go along with religious traditions to avoid stirring up trouble. Been there. Others have treated me like I don't understand the difference between right and wrong. Yep. People have talked about me behind my back because I am secular or non-religious. Yep. Because I am secular or non-religious, and others have rejected. Because I am secular or non-religious, others have rejected, isolated, ignored, or avoided me. Yes. People have told me that I am not a good person because I am secular or non-religious. I have been excluded from social gatherings and events because I am secular or non-religious. Welcome to my life. And this is from a person who was a shining star, in the urban church world, and it all kind of goes away once people realize that even the people who loved you for the non-churchy things, all of a sudden you're not good at any of those things anymore. When I was arrested, in conjunction with my non-belief, I literally had a family member, one who had a hand in raising me, who told me that I deserved to be arrested because I no longer believed in Jesus, and this was Jesus's way of getting me back. And so I was just like, oh, okay, well, fuck you too then, you know. But such is life. Such is life. Well, listen, I hope you all have enjoyed this episode today. I hope you enjoyed this information. Please check out this report. please check out the links in this description. Go learn a little bit more about Black Nonbelievers. They also have a YouTube channel. That's an easy way to support, is to go like and subscribe, to help them get more views, help them get more attention. But also, if you can reach in your pocket and give them a donation, that would be great as well. I plan on doing as much as I can to help support Black Nonbelievers, because they are positioned in the South. They're positioned right there in Georgia, in Atlanta, which among the Black community is pretty much known as Mecca. It used to be DC. DC used to be Chocolate City. Now it's Atlanta. But they're right there doing the work. They're pretty much up the road from me. I'm in Alabama. And I think if we can get them supported and get some networks built, along with the work that we're doing on our channel through the Bridge and Bridge City Global, I think we can see some things drastically change over the next few years. And Black people may be a minority in this country, but we are a loud minority. And so if we can get more Black people, more Black young people who can have the freedom and the fidelity of self to express their secularity and their non-religiosity, then I can almost guarantee you it's going to create almost like, yeah, it's going to push us into that next type of enlightening phase, because that's what it did in the 20s. That's what it did in the 20s. Um, the Harlem Renaissance is one of my favorite periods in history to study, even though I don't like that name, the Harlem Renaissance, because that's not what it was called at the time. It was called the New Negro Movement by Hubert Henry Harrison. When we call it the Harlem Renaissance, it gets reduced to arts. And while the arts were powerfully prolific, they were an incredible medium of getting information out. This was a movement among Black people throughout the Black Belt, and I'm talking about Texas all the way up to Jersey, throughout the Black Belt, who were coming into themselves and doing away with religious norms and religious traditions, um, or even syncretizing religion with secularism, which is what Marcus Garvey's movement did. Um, it's part of the reason his movement was as effective as he was, is that he found a way to which. And Black churches have benefited from his blueprint ever since then. Not just Black churches, the Nation of Islam has benefited from his work even since then. I don't know if you've ever studied the differences between the Nation of Islam and actual Islam, but it's very different. There's a lot of superstitious stories that they've added, but they don't really live by the superstition. They live by the ritual, not the superstition. And a lot of that is coming from Garvey's work. Garvey did this great work, in my opinion, of making their religion practical, and said it don't mean nothing for you if it don't make you get up and do nothing. And so anyway, I'll rabbit trail on that all day long, but I'm telling you, man, let's support Black Nonbelievers. Obviously, I'm gonna do it. Obviously, if you're Black and you want to see more Black communities support specifically for Black Nonbelievers where you are, this is a great organization to get connected with. And though I've talked about financially supporting, let's take that next step. Maybe you're already Black, proud, and loud. You know what I'm saying? Then maybe you connect with Black Nonbelievers as an affiliate. Maybe you reach out to Black Nonbelievers to see if you can get a chapter started right where you are, because that's the real end goal. That's the real end goal. And I know that's another thing that I'm definitely going to be helping, not just Black Nonbelievers, but every secular community that I know of, going to be helping us really get some solid financing, fundraising, revenue strategies, so we can actually do the work. All right, I think I've said a lot. I hope you all have enjoyed this. Please go support Black Nonbelievers, learn about them, consider starting an affiliate program with them, or starting a chapter. And of course, thank you for hanging out with me. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell. Consider connecting to this community in whatever way that makes sense for you. And then, you know, keep rising, stay progressive, and stay beautiful. Do me that favor. I'll holler at you later.